Guys, welcome back to Medical Coding with Blue. Today's episode is all about medical coding job assessment tips. If you're brand new to my channel, welcome. I am Blue. I'm a medical coder. Okay, guys, so job assessments for medical coding jobs, they're different depending on where you're going and where you're applying and things like that. Every place is different. There's not one standardized form for these assessment tests. And it's like that because there would be no way to really judge somebody's competence for this field if everybody had the same assessment test. Because if everybody has the same assessment test, then all you have to do is memorize, and then again, no way to know, no way to weed out who needs more training or who doesn't need as much training. So that's the thing that you have to know up front. The other thing is this. Sometimes people will write to me asking me, well, what about if I don't have coding manuals and I'm trying to apply for these medical coding jobs? What do I do? Sometimes these employers will give you an access code to their encoder and you'll be able to use their encoder. It all depends, okay? Some of them will say, do you have some coding books? If not, we can let you have access to our encoder, or they're going to expect you to try to find some. How can you find some if you don't have coding books yourself? The public library. That is the best place for you to go and try to look for medical coding manuals. Now, if you're in a big city, you have a good chance that there's going to be some medical coding manuals that are a little bit more current, okay? But if you're not, and maybe you're in a small town and maybe they have like older books, they're just a few years old, just do what you can with what you have, okay? Would it be great if you had current year books? Yes. Do I understand that they are very expensive and you're looking for a job and you have no money right now? Yes, I understand that. And yes, I do not recommend that if you are applying that you put yourself out, having to go buy books, and you never know if they're going to give you books, okay? But what I am suggesting is going to the public library and see what they have, okay? And that's the best that you can do. If not, you could always try the old, what is the ICD-10-CM code for whatever condition it is. Whatever pops up on the internet, it may or may not be a current code. It may or may not be as specific as you would find if you were looking in, a coding manual. Okay, so again, it really all depends on how resourceful you want to get with this. Okay, but trying the public library would be a great place. Or if you're a member of the association and maybe you're attending a local meeting, maybe you could ask, does anybody have any old books, because I'm looking for a job right now and I just need to borrow them, that kind of thing. Whatever the case may be, okay? But there's resources out there, that you could find just by going to the public library or going to a local chapter meeting, and see if you can do that way. But a lot of times, some of these employers will, let you have access to their encoder, if not, you're working basically with what you have, okay? Every time I've taken an assessment test, I've always used my own books, but I have the very good fortune to be able to have books. I always order my books. I always make sure that I have my books. So, but I always look for good deals, okay? This is not an ad for Optum, Optum coding books, but if you go to optumcoding.com, they always have really good sales on their books. They're not as good with the sales anymore, where they used to be like 20-something bucks for the books that they wanted to get rid of. Now they're still a good price. And they're still discounted. I find Optum books to be the most comprehensive, most fantastic, most wonderful coding books ever, because they're just really good. And I'm a book lover, so I've gone through these books and when it comes to Optum coding books, nobody beats them hands down, okay? And of course, there's the AMA for the CPT Professional Edition. That I like, okay? But, with all that said, that's going to be your first thing. If you need to have coding manuals to be able to take these, you either go to the public library or you can try to Google the answer. But again, you may not come up with correct answers. But in a pinch, it's what's going to work, okay? or they may have it where you can use their online encoder. So it's not really anything to worry about too much. The other thing that I would recommend for prepping for these job assessment tests, is just to know the basics, of anatomy, and know the basics of these organs and what they do. Just understanding those, that's really going to help you. And then a lot of times, like if you look in your CPT book, if you don't have the CPT book, just try to make sure that you're reviewing your prefixes, your suffixes, and your root words, because sometimes you'll get asked those. I was asked that in 2 of my assessment tests. They asked me about prefixes, suffixes, and root words. They test you on this because if you know prefixes, suffixes, and root words of medical terms, you're more likely to understand what's going on in the documentation because you can piece words together. They're not going to require you to know whole words, but they will more often ask you about prefixes, suffixes, and root words. And again, you use those, you piece them together, and your vocabulary just skyrockets. So that's a great place to, if you want to prepare yourself and you're saying, well, what can I do? Aside from working with workbooks and coding, again, if you don't have books, then you're just going to have to do the best you can with what you got. I would also recommend going to Goodwill or some other thrift store, because you would be surprised. You can find coding manuals there as well. I have a couple of times found whole sets of coding manuals. And so I passed those on to other people that needed them. But it's a great place to find coding manuals too. And you never know what you find at the Goodwill. I'm just saying. So that's another place. Okay. But aside from working with coding workbooks, and that's a great way to help yourself, knowing those prefixes, suffixes, and root words, you can find those easily on the internet, guys. It's such an easy Google. Okay, it's just an easy Google search for common prefixes, suffixes, and root words, medical terminology, and you'll see all of those. Okay, knowing what HIPAA stands for. I put out a poll a few months ago now about what does HIPAA stand for, and do you know a lot of people got it wrong? There was a very small percentage of people who actually got that right. So you have to know it is 2 A's. It is not 2 P's, okay? We need to understand that, okay? Because they may ask you that question, all right? And when it comes to wherever you are applying, let's just say you're applying for a job that's in the emergency department. Well, it's going to be good for you to know about your emergency department CPT codes. And this is where having a book really does help you, because you're going to be able to understand what each E&M level for CPT for the emergency department is, what it all requires, and that kind of thing. You're going to, if you have your coding manuals, your ICD-10-CM coding manual, especially if you got the one from Optum, you'll be able to look at the guidelines. If you don't have your coding manuals, though, you can always Google for free the ICD-10-CM coding guidelines 2025, because we're in 2025 right now. But no, 2026, because we're in the new set now, because we're in October. And October 1 is our coding new year. And we're in the 2026 guidelines right now. So you can Google ICD-10-CM coding guidelines 2026. And you'll see the very first PDF that pops up, and it's going to be from CMS, and it's going to be the PDF, and it's free, it's downloadable, it's 120 some odd pages. Don't freak out, it is just the font size, okay? But those are your current guidelines, all right? Reading through those guidelines is going to help you also to prepare. So again, if you're applying for an emergency department, then it would behoove you to know about injuries, because what gets seen a lot in the ER is injuries, right? So knowing your initial for A, subsequent, D, and sequela, S, you're going to understand those. That's going to help you to understand those injuries and understand what that's about. And knowing all of the things about strokes and coding for heart attacks, knowing that is also really good for you as well. So reviewing the coding guidelines is going to prepare you just as well for a job, any job. And again, It doesn't take you having to spend out all of this money or, where is a question bank, because they're not going to give you a question bank. They're going to give you a test based on the things that are pertinent to their facility and that is important to them that a coder comes in and knows. So again, the person that's applying for the ER, they're going to ask you questions about injuries. They're going to ask you those questions about strokes and heart attacks and things like that. So that makes sense, right? If you're applying at an orthopedic group, it's the same thing. You're going to have to really be up on your game with the injuries, with the global period, what that is, and when it applies to certain procedures, right? What a 0-day global period means, what a 10-day global period means, and what a 90-day global period means. You're going to have to understand that working in orthopedics or working in podiatry. Those things are very important. It's the same thing if you go to a cardio practice. You're going to have to know about the heart, okay? So any of these places that are like organ specific, right? For like the heart, the cardio, then you're going to have to be very proficient with the anatomy of the heart. So that's going to really prepare you very well for applying in a place that's about cardio, and for the brain, neurology. And so you're going to have to know about that. And so there's a lot of things that you can be preparing yourself for that is just common sense at wherever you're applying, okay? If it is a specialty, then you're going to look up that specialty. For family practice, primary care, those you're going to think along the same lines that you would learning about the emergency department, except for you're going to look at those outpatient codes for CPT, for the evaluation and management, for the office, outpatient office visits. You're going to look at that, okay? So that you know the difference between a new patient and an established patient. That goes the same thing for ortho and, cardio and neuro and all of those, okay? You're going to learn about what those things mean, all right? You're going to learn about modifiers and know when modifier 25 applies. Know when modifier 24 applies, okay? And know when modifier 57 applies. All right. And these three are going to be on the evaluation and management codes. And modifier 27 is what you're going to really have to know for the emergency department. Okay. So those are things. Look them up, guys. Look them up. Look them up, because it's going to help you to be prepared. All right. And that's going to blow them away when you can sit there and say during that assessment, hey, I know this, because you may be going to a job interview and they may say, well, do you have any questions for us? And if you can't think of something, what could you say in return? You could say, hey, well, I do have some questions, but I would like to share with you some of my favorite things about this specialty. And if they say, well, okay, well, go ahead, and if you say, if you're applying for an ER position and you say, I know about modifier 27, and they're going to say modifier 27, and then you go on and you describe when modifier 27 applies in the emergency department. I'm going to leave that for y'all to look up, okay? But if you can explain that to them, they're going to be like, gosh, this person really knows. Like, hey, that's wonderful. Okay, well, what else do you know? I know about modifier 54. And then you start explaining about modifier 54 too, and they're just like, ooh, we got a good one on our hands right here. So that's the thing. 54 goes on procedures, just so we know, okay? But that's the thing. You're going to be able to set yourself aside from all these other people that are applying, right? By showing off your knowledge, and the job assessment is a great place to start. And knowing where you're applying specialty-wise and concentrating on things that are about that specialty, that is going to set you apart from all these other candidates that are out here just not knowing what to do or what to expect. Okay? So when I applied for my job as a professional fee coder, they were asking me about prefixes, suffixes, and root words. They were asking me about CPT. They were asking me about evaluation and management. They were asking me about modifiers. And it had to be rapid fire. It was just like quick. And if you can respond as quickly, and if I ask you, hey, what is modifier 25? What is modifier 57? What is modifier, 51 for? You know what I mean? Like, if you can explain to me all of these things, rapid fire. If you can tell me what is a code range for evaluation and management for the ER, what is a code range for a new patient in the outpatient clinic? What is the code range for an established patient in the outpatient clinic? And what makes a new patient in the outpatient clinic? And what makes an established patient in the outpatient clinic? These things are what is going to help you. This is what you have to know. So everything that you learned in the school, obviously, but again, we're going to tie it to the common sense things for wherever we're applying at. Okay, so if you have vast majority or vast subjects because you're doing primary care or family practice or professional fee coding, you're just going to have to study everything. Get a workbook, any workbook for coding, and start practicing. Okay, if you're doing the outpatient side, you're going to get those outpatient coding books. The CPC study guide is the one that I always recommend. I'm not with AAPC, but I will recommend that book because it's fantastically written. On the diagnosis side and on the inpatient procedure side, they have the ICD-10-CM and ICD-10-PCS Coding Handbook with the Answers by Nellie Leon Chizen. It is one book, okay? It's a long title, but it is one book. The link for it is in the description box below. The title is also there as well. You do not have to click on any of those links. You can certainly just get the title and go wherever you find your books. And that's how you can get those and check those out at the public library. Another great find to be able to prepare yourself for these job assessment tests, okay? And you have to take them seriously because you're going in there, and especially for my new folks that are going in there with no experience, and they're taking a chance and giving you this assessment test, then you need to do everything you can to impress them as much as you can, and make sure that you do very well on that test, okay? They may or may not tell you what you got right. They may or may not go over with you what the answers were, okay? And that's just the way that it is. They have to protect the integrity of these exams because if they were to give you the answer sheet, they have no way of knowing if you're going to go out into the internet and post it for everybody to see, and oh yeah, that's the job assessment test for this facility, and then all of a sudden if they're giving out this job assessment, then everybody's getting all these answers correct. Well, then they have no way to know who's actually legitimately competent versus who is, just there, just needing to be trained, but not really knowing what they're doing, So that's the thing that you have to know there. But these are very easy prep tips, okay, when it comes to preparing for these job assessment tests, and just do the best that you can. Sometimes they are timed. Sometimes they'll be watching you. They'll do this over Zoom, or they'll do it over Teams, or whatever platform that they're using, and then they'll say, you have this amount of time because they're going to watch you to see if you're doing it. Sometimes they will give you the test and then they'll email it to you and say it needs to be back within 24 hours, and then you work on the test at your leisure, and then you turn it in before the time, so that way they know. Again, it really is dependent on the people in that place. I've had managers before ask me, well, this is my first job as a manager, what do I test on? What is important to your facility? What is important for the people to know? If they're applying for primary care, I would want somebody who's going to know about immunizations, right? Those things are very important, in knowing how to code those. Somebody who's working in the ER, it would be good if you know how to code for hydration, right? Those are things that are very important in those instances, okay? Try to tie those to those. My very first job was at the Cancer Therapy Research Center. So that's all oncology coding, and having to know about oncology coding, that is everything, okay? Knowing about that, the neoplasm table, and knowing how to use that, and understanding what the difference is between primary and the secondary site, the metastatic sites, understanding what that means, those things are very, very important, and they tie a lot to your knowledge. And so whatever you want to, wherever you want to apply, make sure that you're studying for that specific chapter in the guidelines. Review those guidelines, okay? Review those guidelines. That's important. It's the same thing if you're trying to apply for an OBGYN clinic. You're going to have to know about mother-baby, right? So read those guidelines so that way you're prepared. You know, you don't have to memorize, but just read them so that you are prepared. And that way they know, okay, this person is taking their time to study and prepare themselves well for getting in here. Okay. It's a lot of effort, guys. It is a lot of effort. And I never want to tell you these things so that y'all are scared. I want you to be prepared. Preparation is everything in this industry. It is literally everything. So that's why, again, I say if you put in that time and you get those resources, that is going to help you when you are taking these assessment tests. All right. So with that said, that would be what I would recommend. If you don't have a book, don't put yourself out, trying to buy all these books and things like that. Only get those if you can afford them. If not, go to the public library. Public library is a fantastic place. In the big cities, they have libraries all over town. Okay, and then you can even ask them to borrow a book from another place if you don't want to go all the way to the other place, and that may be good. Okay, and that's a really great and cost-effective way to help yourself in this situation, because you shouldn't have to put out all of this money to learn these things. And especially when the internet provides a wealth of free resources and a wealth of videos about anatomy and medical terminology and all of those good things. Okay, Crash Course is my favorite channel for all of that. There's lots of them out there. Okay, all you have to do is just let your fingers do the walking, and it's the same thing with HIPAA. They even have HIPAA channels, and I don't have to give a HIPAA channel specific on that because everybody's saying the same thing. All you have to do is just put in HIPAA, and you'll see lots of videos pop up about HIPAA. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. But yes, that is my recommendation if you are out there applying for jobs, and those are my tips, is to look at where you're applying and concentrate on those guidelines. Learn things that are specific about that specialty, so that way when you are interviewing, you can share some of that knowledge. And if you know about the global periods, that is very important. Knowing when your modifiers apply, knowing which modifiers apply to evaluation and management only. There's a handful of them. And what about these other modifiers and things like that, knowing about that, that's going to be impressive, guys. That's a great way to set yourself apart. But it all starts with your knowledge. It starts with your resume, right? Having a good resume to get their attention in the very first place. Okay, take that resume seriously, y'all. Take it seriously. One page. I've talked about this before, but that's going to be that hook for them to call you and say, you know what, you were brave enough to apply even without experience. Here's an assessment test. Let's see how you do. And now is not the time to flounder. Now is the time to soar, baby eagle. Okay, soar. And so that way you can show, hey, I had this problem, which I didn't have a book, so I went to the public library and I borrowed a book. Okay, I can't find a book at the public library. I went to the local thrift stores to see if they have any coding books. They didn't have any. Okay, well, then I went to the local chapter meeting and I found somebody that will let me borrow their books. And you may find somebody who's willing to give away their books, because when they get new books, or maybe their employer gave them new books and they just want to get rid of them and they're passing them on to somebody else, that's a really good thing, that you can, I'm right there, to get those books. I would be, so that's just another option out there. But look at those things that are available to you. Use as many free resources as you can to help you. Like I said, don't financially hurt yourself just trying to buy all these books, because it's not necessary. Okay, so with that said, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this one up. Thank you guys so much for joining me. If this video helped you, please like, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you next time. Bye.